This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
We are now just 1 week away from the initial college football playoff rankings for the 2025 season, which means it is time to lock in some futures before week number 10 and break down some key games across week 10 as well. We've got Austin Swaim on deck for today to break down his thoughts on week 10. We'll talk about those college football playoff odds and his favorite bets at FanDuel Sportsbook. Welcome on into Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research. Joined here as mentioned by Austin Swaim. Check him out on X, Blue Sky, and Threads at ASwaim3. Check out his work at FanDuel Research, where he is a senior editor for us. Austin, we are on to week number 10 in college football. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well, Jim. Unfortunately, my first career path of fired Division I college football coach didn't end up working out for me to make $50 million to get fired. So FanDuel Research is a really, really good second place. It feels like we're kind of getting rid of guys really quickly and spending a lot of money to do it these days in college football. So it's an interesting time.
I know that James Franklin had a stipulation in his contract that he had to seek out work in order to get the full allotment of his payment. And I'm curious if Brian Kelly is the same thing. And would we count? Should we get Brian Kelly and James Franklin on Covering the Spread to break down some bets? Would that fit the obligation of their contract to get the full buyout?
That would be so much fun. James Franklin on any show is all electric. Now, I don't know. I'll leave my thoughts on Brian Kelly aside. I was a childhood Notre Dame fan, so I've got plenty of those layers. But that would be awesome. And I think signing up for a deal with FanDuel would be good use of their time. So James, Brian, if you hear us, we're here.
Does Brian Kelly go back to the Indiana accent, the Midwest accent, now that he is no longer at LSU? Does the accent revert now?
I think so. And,
okay.
Maybe if he ends up in the wrong spot, maybe in the Northeast somewhere, do we develop a Boston accent or something like that? I'm not sure.
No. I lived in Boston for 2 years and Providence for 1. Those are very different accents, but I can't do that anymore. I full respect to those people. The accent, for whatever reason, does not mesh with my ears, so I need that to not happen. Yep. Preferably, because Brian Kelly gets too much airtime for me to hear that. So vetoed. Come to FanDuel Research instead. We'll fulfill your buyout obligations there. We're going to talk about the college football playoff because, again, rankings coming out next week for that. So we want to catch some last minute value in the markets before potentially things move next week. We're going to try to do that today. And we'll talk through Vandy, Texas with the complications there with Arch's status. We'll talk through Georgia versus Florida. Florida not the best team this year, but hey, it's a fun rivalry in a fun site as always. Cincinnati, Utah, question marks there too, but hey, we'll break down some fun games for this week. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page and Covering the Spread podcast feed. We're with you Monday through Friday during college football and NFL season. My thoughts on NFL Week number 9 already posted, getting through all NFL Week 9 games, breaking down my models, spread and total predictions, initial bets I like at FanDuel Sportsbook as well. Tomorrow, Riley Thomas will join me to talk about some NFL Week number 9. Andy Nader swings by on Friday talking NFL player props, all right here on the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page and Covering the Spread podcast feed. Subscribe there, thumbs up on YouTube, 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and of course, turn on notifications on YouTube as well. FanDuel is getting you ready for kickoff with an offer you won't want to miss. New customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet $5, and if it wins, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. You can build parlays, bet player props, ride the live lines, whatever your style, FanDuel has you covered. NFL season is finally here. Only question is, are you ready to play? Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC, Kentucky, or Wyoming. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's begin things awesome by breaking down these college football playoff odds. As mentioned, we are just 1 week away from the initial rankings reveal. With the race starting to take shape, any team stand out to you as being values to make the playoff of FanDuel Sportsbook, to miss, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so I definitely think that there are a couple markets that I'm looking at right now. I think Ohio State has separated from pretty much everyone when you think maybe second in charge is Indiana. I was actually just talking, you mentioned you're having Riley on tomorrow. Riley's also a resident Buckeyes fan, so I was talking to him a little bit about some of the NFL talent that is on Ohio State's defense, like Arvell Reese and Caleb Downs, and some of the cartoonish numbers that Ohio State's defense is limiting opponents to, like Wisconsin looked like they were an FCS team. So to make the college football national championship, not to win it, Ohio State's just plus 115. I still think plus money on that is really, really solid odds. They look well positioned to get a first round bye. They'll be at least a double digit favorite in most of their remaining games, including over Michigan, which for whatever reason has been the biggest obstacle for Ohio State to this point. They're plus 260 to win it all. They're plus 115 to make the game. I still think that those numbers are too high when I look relative to Indiana, to Alabama, teams that we've seen can have some problems. Now, Indiana, impressive road win on Oregon. I still think the jury is out, though, whether they can potentially put up that same amount of points against Ohio State. And this Ohio State offense is young, man. They got a lot of freshmen, new starters. They're starting to come into their own. Julian Sayin had over 375 passing yards last week. We'll talk about him a little bit later. But Ohio State, to me, I think because they haven't quite separated from everyone else, is still a decent value in these markets.
Yeah, as you mentioned, plus 115 to make the national championship game. They are plus 260 to win it all. Both those numbers are very short. And as we saw, there can be some changes late in this year, and the college football playoff is a tough road, even if you do get that first round bye. But it sounds like you're viewing them as just being a tier above the rest as things stand.
Yeah, the predictability of Ohio State's defense is that this is a unit where I don't know if anybody's going to score more than 17 points against Ohio State all year. We saw Texas badly struggle, even though it was the first game of the year. And we'll talk about how overmatched Penn State might be later in the show with their backup quarterback. But Ohio State, with the advantage that they have, they can play a track meet. They've got Cardell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. I don't know why I just blanked on the best receiver in the country's name, but they can play a track meet. They've got a developing running game with a couple of freshman running backs. I think Ohio State does everything well, and they've of course, got the confidence of winning last year. So they are short numbers, but there's just not really any other team that I look at and I feel like is particularly undervalued at this spot. Notre Dame is playing very well, but they also have a bit of a hard road to get into the college football playoff after their slow start. Texas A&M, I think, has some defensive concerns when I just look at the board there on FanDuel. Like, I don't feel as good about anybody's defense or anywhere close as I do Ohio State, especially since Texas Tech is now lost as well.
All right. The favorites are the favorites for a reason, it sounds like, here for Ohio State entering the November, the final full month of college football for this year.
I got one more for you. Yep.
Let's do it.
So just to make the college football playoff, definitely not a run toward the national title, but to make the college football playoff, I'm looking at Georgia Tech right now, undefeated, kind of hovering around that 12 mark in the AP poll. I actually don't even know where they came in the AP poll officially, but I think Miami's loss to Louisville was incredibly consequential for Georgia Tech in that now they might be able to dodge a team and a defense as good as Miami. Miami stops the run at a top 10 rate in the country. Now I look at Georgia Tech's schedule. They will be favored in every remaining ACC game. Georgia's going to be a tough one, but when I'm talking about making the ACC championship, it looks right now they could face Virginia, they could face Pitt, they could face Louisville. I think they would be favored against all three of those teams when Haynes King running for north of 100 yards per game. It's a very predictable ball control style, even though I don't know if Georgia Tech's defense is quite up to snuff. They're 56th in pass yards per attempt allowed, outside the top 75 in rush yards per attempt allowed. So I don't think Georgia Tech is a national title contender. But the way things are shaking out for them, you see they're plus 600 there to finish undefeated. I think a lot of that has to do with Georgia in that non-ACC game. But when I look at the committee last year, they took Indiana and they took SMU with better resumes than per se better teams that we saw with Ole Miss and with Alabama. Georgia Tech, if they have just the one loss to Georgia on their resume, Georgia's maybe a top 4 seed in the country. It'll be really hard to not take them to make the college football playoff. So I think plus 120 for who I'd consider the ACC favorite based on path is a really good number.
Yeah, as mentioned, 6-1 to go undefeated due to that Georgia game, but plus 120 to make the playoff is a Georgia Tech as things stand. You mentioned Texas earlier on and their issues taking on Ohio State. They may have issues this week as well because Arch Manning is in concussion protocol and they're hosting Vanderbilt for this week. And Vandy has looked really good. They've played some good football. They passed a lot of key tests. They just shut down Mizzou this past week. So let's talk about this one, Austin. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, Texas favored by 1.5. Total is 44.5. That total has come down a tick from where it was yesterday, and the spread is tightened. So sounds like the Arch uncertainty is very, very real entering this game as he is in concussion protocol. Austin, what are you seeing here, Vandy versus Texas, as things stand?
Yeah, I see odds makers as taking a middle of the road stance on Texas here because they're about 65 to 70% in most power football index models. So like that would be a money line much larger than minus 120. I think they probably shift to a dog if we get news, say Friday night, that Arch Manning's not going to play. So right now, I think they're taking sort of a middle road position with it. I still kind of like Texas, whether Arch plays or not. And so I think I would hop on this minus 120 now. I still have waiting period because this line actually dropped from minus 125 to minus 120 yesterday. So predicting injury news can be kind of a really tough thing to toe in markets. We saw that in the NFL with Lamar Jackson this past week, right? Is if you got the best of the number or not, it ended up not mattering. But I am trying to play this number correctly, but I do like Texas to win because I think there's just a mismatch in the trenches here. Texas allowing just 2.4 yards per carry. That's second best in FBS. They're third in EPA allowed per carry. Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt, they're one of the run heaviest teams in the SEC. That's kind of their magic sauce to not only limit potentially their limited defense, but also in order to move the football themselves. Texas is really great in the trenches, and they've got all these NFL dudes. Linebacker Anthony Hill Jr. is a stud. It is still all out in front of Texas. I know it feels like they've had this dismal season where they lost to Ohio State and they lost to Florida, but they've got this game. They got at Georgia. They got at Texas A&M. I don't even think they need to win all three to be positioned to a spot where they'll be in that final argument with a team like Georgia Tech of, do we take 3-loss Texas when Ohio State was basically a free square, or do we take Georgia Tech with their one loss? We know Texas might be the better team. The biggest thing that I want to buy, especially if I get some positive news about Arch played well last week against Mississippi State. Threw for 3 touchdowns, over 350 yards passing. We saw Pavia really struggle against Alabama when they limited to just okay on the ground. He only averaged 5.6 yards per carry. If Texas can shut down this running game and make Pavia beat them with his arm, I think they can win the game with or without Arch.
Yeah, as you mentioned right now, that money line sitting at minus 120 did move from minus 125 to minus 120, as you alluded to. So possible we can wait this one out and kind of see what happens. Let's say Arch is definitively ruled out. And like you said, maybe we get this at around even money for Texas or somewhere around there. Let's say there is definitively no Arch. It sounds like you'd still be on Texas after the number moves at that point too. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I'd want at least 2.5 with the number. I've got Arch maybe about 2, 3, 4 points of value roughly. Okay, we don't know anything about the backup quarterback for Texas. He had 1 completion last week. Haven't seen a ton of him, so I would have to make, before I would go to the market and be like, okay, am I going to bet Texas as an underdog? I have to do a little bit more work there, but I have a little bit of optimism. I think Arch is going to play, and that's kind of why I think I would pounce on it right now.
All right, so we'll see what Arch can do if he can get it out there. Yeah. But like you said, did look a lot better last week, which is encouraging. He can be very fun to watch, and I'd like him to be fun to watch. So hopefully he's healthy and good to go for this one. But Austin is backing Texas minus 120 on the money line there. Let's talk about the game down in Jacksonville between Georgia and Florida. It's a tough one because Georgia favored by 7.5 on a neutral field here, and the total in this game is at 50.5. Now, Florida's having a tough year, but they've proven last year that they can be a team that plays spoiler at times against very good teams. So pretty big number here. Did they keep this one close enough to cover, or did the Dogs coast down in Jacksonville?
Yeah, I mean, they've done it this year. They got Texas in the swamp, even though that was, that was at home. But I think this number is right around a touchdown, which sounds weird given how much worse Florida's season has gone and how they've gotten rid of their head coach, and they're going to have an opening and might be calling Lane Kiffin behind the scenes here. But my favorite bet in this one is actually not a side. I really like the over in this game, where I think both quarterbacks can have a lot of success, and this will funnel it to more. We love pace and we love pass when we're going to bet pass rates when we're going to bet an over. I think both of those things can be true here. When both teams are top 15 defenses in rushing EPA allowed per carry, they're outside the top 70 in EPA per dropback. So really, really heavy pass funnels on both sides here. Gunnar Stockton has looked great in the last few weeks. He's completing 70.5% of his throws overall. He's got a couple of reliable targets he's starting to form chemistry with in Zachariah Branch and Oscar Delp. And then DJ Lagway, really tough schedule, weirdly enough. 7 Florida games so far, 5 of them have come against top 50 teams in EPA per dropback. Remember him shredding Texas, 298 yards. They've got some young weapons on Florida's offense. I think both of these quarterbacks can have success. When we've seen Georgia play high-scoring games against an Ole Miss, against a Tennessee defense that was pretty good, they kind of have been more of a shootout team in 2025. I don't know where this falls on the spread of a hook. Frankly, the number scares me when like the first half spread's like 4 points here. And I'm like, what is going on? To me, that is predicated on DJ Lagway might have some success against this struggling Georgia secondary. So I like the over 50.5 at -110.
You talked about the quarterbacks and how well they've been playing. We like the over here. We do have props up in this game, and there are not props up in most other games, given that we've got injuries to a bunch of different quarterbacks. And interested in buying into the quarterbacks through the prop market or any other props in general you like in this one?
How about this? Let's look at a receiver, because there's also a little bit of news that I was looking at here. You had me on. You knew I was going to talk props. I like to dust off this little projections model that I made whenever I can, right? How about Zachariah Branch is open in this market for Georgia? He has now cleared his receiving prop, listed 55.5 right here early in the week in 2 straight games for the Bulldogs. They had some injury news. Colby Young, unfortunately, is going to miss quite a bit of time with a fractured leg. He is going to be a stud in the NFL. He's a ton of fun to watch. But that really has cleared the way for Branch to see more work. He had a 26.7% target share against Ole Miss 2 weeks ago. He had 8 targets. No one else had more than 5. This was in a game where Georgia ran for 212 yards, too. So they didn't really need to throw the ball, but they still let Gunnar Stockton drop back and throw it 31 times. That's the kind of vibe that this Georgia offense is going with right now. I think a lot of it's going to pass through Branch. Now, the problem with Branch and why this prop is still so low, just a 2.8 yard average depth of target. So it's a lot of design looks, a lot of gibbies. But if he's going to get like double-digit looks here, my projections model still likes him at this number. I've got him at 60.5 receiving yards at a median. I think catches might be a better bet when we get it, but there's also the chance that this number skyrockets throughout the week as the market realizes Branch has such a lion's share of work now with no Colby Young. I'm just going to hop on yards now, anticipating this line to rise substantially this week.
All right. As mentioned, that's 55.5 for Zachariah Branch, given the potential for more work going forward, but also just a good workload before that. That's kind of what I want, is a guy who was getting work previously, good enough to force his way on the field, and then open up some more targets in the pecking order. That can be a good thing too. So liking the overall infrastructure in this game, as Austin does like the over, but then also liking Branch specifically based on that role he has and the potential for him to get even more. Let's talk now about our final game of the week. That is Cincinnati taking on Utah. College game day going to be out there for this one. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, Utah favored by 8.5. And the total in this game is 55.5. And that spread is noteworthy because it was 7.5 yesterday. Utah has this injury question mark at quarterback. Tough losses to BYU and Texas Tech, but this offense has been really good outside of those games. Can they do it again here, Austin, and cover a somewhat big and increasingly big number at home against Cincinnati?
Yeah, what's crazy is they're doing it without a truly functional passing game, because they had a true freshman last week step into action for Devin Dampier. They still had 43 points at halftime against my Buffaloes. I watched every second. It was horrifying.
Sorry to bring them up on the show here today. I wish I could have avoided it for you.
Hey, man, but Utah is a team I was very high on. I was on with you earlier. I talked about them, about Texas Tech. They have the 2 NFL offensive tackles in Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano. They are awesome when it comes to running the ball, and I think both teams can have success running the ball here. Defenses are 83rd or worse in expected points added per carry, but I like a team total for Cincinnati here. When I look at Cincinnati's scoring average, 33.7 points per game, their line in this game is just 23.5 points at FanDuel Sportsbook. That is very strange to me when Cincinnati should be able to run the ball. It's a dual-pronged attack, not only with Tawee Walker and Evan Pryor out of the backfield. Brendan Sorsby, Jim, a guy that, not too distant future, will be throwing out my first NFL mock draft version. Brendan Sorsby, 6'3", incredibly mobile. Very similar to Jackson Dart, where I wouldn't silo him as like a pocket passer or a scrambler. Like he's kind of like a playmaker. Like I don't really know the archetype to define there, but huge arm, like can flick it 50 yards on a dime. Sorsby's been incredibly impressive, obviously, with Cincinnati putting up all these points, but I don't know if they can stop Utah's ground attack. Not many have, and Cincinnati's rush defense is not very good. I don't know if they cover 8.5 here because Utah's been putting up 40, 50 burgers on people, but I do like Cincinnati to be able to score, and that's my favorite angle when I got some uncertainty with Utah about the quarterback position, but if I can get a team total on the right side of a key number of 24, I'll take it.
Well, I checked out Sorsby's QBR. He is sitting at 84.8. That's speaking my language. I can always get behind that. And you said the magical D word, dart. That'll get me intrigued too. So we're checking some fun boxes there on that.
Yeah, he's a little bit bigger than Jackson, and I'd say maybe even a little bit stronger arm. The thing is that I don't know if he's as good under pressure as Dart was. Like, we'll get to the full evaluations, we'll get to rankings. You and I will when we get done with NFL season. But Sorsby, this is a big matchup for him because Utah is not the easiest pass defense. So I want to see how he fares on the road, tough environment. Now you're telling me College game day is going to be there, and that campus is going to be on fire. So we'll see how it goes.
Tough team, tough environment, but if he can pass the test there, that's always a good thing for sure. But Austin is on the Cincinnati team total over 23.5. That is -112 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Okay, Austin, opening up the board for you right now. Where else is seeing value across week 10 at FanDuel Sportsbook?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a line and then I'll give you a prop. So let's start in the spread market. I'm looking at USC Nebraska in the Big Ten. It's in Lincoln. Give me Nebraska +6.5 here. I think it's a good buy low spot for a Nebraska offense that just faced Northwestern and Minnesota, two of the slowest, most defensive-minded teams in the Big Ten. They eliminate fun. USC will allow for a little bit more of it here, and I think Dylan Raiola, he's quietly playing very well. I know he didn't have a good game 2 weeks ago, Friday in Minnesota, but Minnesota's very good defense. Raiola kept them in the game against Michigan, had the Hail Mary at the end of the half there. USC is not a good defense. They're 61st in yards per carry allowed. They're 86th in pass yards per attempt allowed. We've seen that throughout the struggle of Lincoln Riley in this entire tenure in USC. In fact, USC is 2-6 straight up on the road since the start of last year. Now you're giving me 6.5 points in Lincoln. I know there's this thing, maybe Nebraska can't win the big game, but they beat Cincinnati earlier this year, and I think they are an ascending quantity when a big loss for USC, when the path against Nebraska has been to run the ball. Waymon Jordan's not going to be back from an ankle injury. It'll still be King Miller. I imagine they'll still have some success there. I hate betting against Jaden Mayava because we're going to talk about quarterbacks when we get there. Mayava's had an unbelievable year, but to me, I think this could be a fun game between a couple of good NFL draft prospects down the road. Raiola maybe next year, but I like Nebraska getting the points here, and they're not crazy to think they could win this game when Riley really is struggling on the road.
Yeah, you mentioned they can't win the big game. They don't need to. They got 6.5 in this one. 6.5 at home in that environment. That's a sick environment. Like my favorite place. Yep. Well, outside of the big house. I don't know. It's between there and the big house. My favorite environment for college football is Lincoln. It's a pretty sick place. So that's a fun place to they'll get a boost there at least.
Yeah, definitely the hardest casualty of some of the movement in college football as a Colorado fan was the Nebraska rivalry. That was such a good rivalry on both sides. It was always fun when they'd come here and we'd tell them N stood for knowledge at their campus. But I'll take the Husker. I'm kind of betraying my Buffs roots by taking the Huskers this week, but I like the number here.
Well, you got the battle for that, and we got the battle for the true NU between Nebraska and Northwestern. Nebraska gets to hold it for this year. That's to be expected, and that's okay. I will settle for, I guess, NW or whatever people decide to call Northwestern, which is an abomination. It's one word. I don't know why they go with NW. Anyway, right. So Austin is on Nebraska +6.5, which is now -114 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Moved as we were talking about that there from -110. So someone else is with you on that one, Austin. Mentioned a prop. Where are you seeing value there?
Yes, so really, we're recording here on Tuesday. Don't have a ton of props up, but Ohio State, Penn State has them. And this isn't quite the showdown we thought it was going to be between Ohio State and Penn State. Obviously, Penn State fired James Franklin. They lost Drew Aller. So they're kind of a mess. That's why they're a 20.5 point underdog here. That sort of game script is why I'm on Julian saying under 253.5 passing yards here. This is hitting 3 of his 5 Power 4 games. Ohio State's pass game is fine. I mean, Sayin lit it up last week against Wisconsin. We know what he can do with Smith and Tate outside. I think this is an opportunity in a matchup that calls for them to maybe work on their running game, which has been the struggle, relatively speaking, of the Ohio State offense so far. Penn State is 10th in passing yards per attempt allowed, 72nd in rushing yards per attempt allowed. That's how UCLA was able to spring the upset. That's how Iowa was able to beat them. This is a good matchup for Ohio State to try to run the ball, figure out Isaiah West or Bo Jackson, which one of these dudes is going to be our guy. The CJ Donaldson transfer hasn't quite worked out for them. I am forecasting just a 47.2% pass rate for Ohio State in this game. That honestly feels hefty. I think it could be even lower than that in practice. With that pass rate, I've only got Sayin posting 218.1 yards passing here. I think there's a ton of value in that. This is a hard matchup for him, the game script, and then I think conceptually about what Ohio State might want to take away from this game. They know Sayin can light it up. But in this spot, I don't think he's going to be given as many opportunities, maybe similar to that 230s range that he falls into like he did against Washington.
All right, so not against Sayin, just on the game script here for Ohio State, taking the Sayin passing yardage prop under 253.5. That is minus 114. That is all that we have here for today on Covering the Spread. As mentioned, back once again tomorrow. We're going to talk to Riley Thomas about some NFL for week number 9. Annie Nader Friday, all right here in the same podcast feed, Covering the Spread there. FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page as well. Austin, appreciate the time as always. Enjoy college football week 10. We'll talk to you once again soon.
Okay, Jim, sounds like a plan. I know you're also going to be watching NASCAR Championship weekend, so enjoy your time with that this weekend because I'll be tuned in too.
I got my bet in for the Cup Series already too, so we'll talk about that Thursday. But
heck yeah, I'll have to tune in and find out who it is.
I mostly care about the Saturday one because I got a Village future I need to cash, but the Sunday one I have a rooting interest as well. Find Austin on X, Blue Sky, and Threads at Swaim3. I am on X and Blue Sky at JimSannes, on Threads at Jim.Sannes, and you can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Big thank you to our YouTube producer Justin Lane for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your college football week 10 bets. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow to break down NFL week number 9. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.